Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyervip.com. Today is October the 10th, 2017. But first, remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, I've been out of town. In fact, I was visiting some friends in Florida. Friend had a wedding over there. And let me just say, if you're in Florida, I know it's counterintuitive. You need to wear an undershirt. Otherwise, the sweat is just going to go straight through your shirt. The humidity in Florida, you got to be prepared for it. Let me also say, too, for those of you looking for a small bar that delivers, take a look at Capone's in Fort Lauderdale. I don't know the owner. I don't know anyone involved from an investment perspective there. I'm just saying that they're offering 3-for-1 drinks. Don't expect top shelf at that price. You can get top shelf there, but don't expect top shelf for 3-to-1. A lot of women, great part of town, a lot of partying, a lot of bars all around it. Well, let's just say it delivers. All right, let's talk about a fight that really shocked me. I personally was surprised by this fight. Chris Eubank Jr.'s destruction of Avni Yildirim. Now, let me just say out the gate, for Chris Eubank, this was a 5-star performance, right? What I want people to do, what I want young fighters to do, is to look at this film. It's a short film. I've put a link to the video in my favorites folder here on YouTube. You need to look at it because Eubank is doing a lot here. He's doing a lot, quite frankly, that I don't think guys with slower foot speed and less athleticism like Saul Alvarez can do. By the way, I don't mean to pick on Saul Alvarez, but let's just name a highly regarded, we'll call him establishment fighter, who, judges know is highly respected when they're putting their scores on their scorecards. We'll just put it that way. Right? Understand that Canelo can't move. This is a movement, distance, change of spacing type of performance by Chris Eubank. And there are a lot of guys in the sport, I would put Canelo in this group, who just don't have the athleticism to pull this off. Let me just say this. I've said it before here online. Chris Eubank is the guy who Golovkin, if he wants to preserve his legacy or expand it, needs to fight. Understand, from a style perspective, it would be a lot more fascinating than Golovkin against Canelo, because if Golovkin tries to chase Eubank, Eubank has the ability to deliver pretty devastating uppercuts and to hide his upper body deep in the pocket. Not only that, Eubank doesn't have to move backwards like Canelo all the time. Eubank can actually draw a line in the sand and force Golovkin to come up to him. That'd be a great fight. I hope the powers in boxing consider it. Understand, titles are nice. And both Golovkin and Eubank have a title, right? Titles are nice. And I understand some sanctioning body has demanded an immediate rematch of Golovkin against Canelo. But more important than titles is legacy. In other words, the fans know when two guys who are close to their primes are fighting other quality prime opponents, right? Eubank against Golovkin, the champ at 160 against the champ at 168. That'd be good. That'd be good. Now let's talk about this fight. This fight surprised me. I know the hedge held. I did a video on this fight and I said, you want to hedge Yildirim to win with Eubank by KO. But just to understand, I privately thought Yildirim was going to beat Eubank. Right? Now, let me just say, I'll concede up front. You know, certain things surprise you. Let me concede right here that I was surprised. I was caught off guard. I was astonished by the foot speed gap. It's pronounced here. Right? Eubank can move on his feet. He moves a lot faster than Yildirim. That allowed him to do certain things. Now, let me say, I was skeptical on Eubank going in. I thought Eubank got completely undressed by Billy Joe Saunders in the first half of their fight. Right? While he has excellent punching power, I question his ability to win the slow rounds against a boxer who could maintain spacing and defense, right? Who could use a jab to keep Eubank off of them, and who had the defensive skills to get by Eubank's episodes, right? I thought Eubank's offense going into this fight was a bit predictable. He throws hard uppercuts. There's no question about that. But an uppercut leaves you open for a power counter, right? An opponent knowing what they're doing. You know, if I come over here, let me just show you visually. If I come over here and I throw an uppercut with this hand, right? An opponent expecting that uppercut can slip out of the pocket. My punch misses. I got nothing to protect myself on this side, right? I have nothing to protect myself on the side in which I'm throwing the uppercut. Also, if I throw the uppercut, understand a body puncher could come in and hit me to the body here, could take out my head. You know, the opponent wouldn't have to be bashful. Fighters have to think hard before throwing uppercuts, right? Because they have to ask themselves the question of whether an opponent is adept enough to slip the uppercut and then to make you pay. Let me also say, too, that an opponent has to be up close to get hit with an uppercut, right? So against someone like, let's say, a Mayweather or a Ward, that person's going to be too savvy if the uppercut's the big tool in your shed, right? An opponent can take it away from you just by their positioning in the ring. I also thought that Eubank looked very episodic to me. It was all or nothing. In other words, either he's landing power shots on you, hooks and uppercuts, or he's not doing much in the ring, right? If it's a slow fight that involves feints and jabs, I thought he would be as outboxed as he was the first half of a Billy Joe Saunders fight. Now let's talk about Yildirim. I viewed Yildirim as mentally tough, right? I thought he would smother Eubank. In other words, maybe I confused Yildirim with Archie Moore. But I thought Yildirim understood that Eubank throws a great uppercut. This isn't the first fight where Eubank has shown it. I thought Yildirim understood that he needed to get Eubank on his back foot while avoiding the uppercut, right? And I thought he would be able to wear Eubank out because Eubank doesn't strike me as a 3-minute around fighter. So Yildirim does. I thought Yildirim would come forward. I mentioned Archie Moore earlier. I thought he'd have an arm bar down here, right? This is how the old mongoose used to do it. I thought he'd have an arm bar down here, or at least do it like Evander Holyfield, right? Holyfield would come in like this. So if you threw an uppercut, he'd catch it here. He'd have his chin lined up with his arm bar, right? So he's coming forward, and fighters like Mike Tyson, who had great uppercuts, understood they couldn't land an uppercut on Evander Holyfield. So I thought Yildirim would come in with an arm bar prepared for the uppercut, and I thought he was going to come in and get too close to Eubank for Eubank to really know what to do. And I thought Yildirim, whose nickname was Mr. Robot, was going to break down Eubank after a few rounds. Keep in mind, too, the fight was in Germany. Now, I know Yildirim's Turkish, but Yildirim had fought in Germany. Yildirim didn't have to deal with a UK crowd. Right? I figured the crowd would be a Yildirim crowd. That Eubank, who is a guy who likes to fire up the crowd. He's one of the best in boxing at looking at the crowd and looking a certain way, just like his father, and getting the crowd into the fight. I thought he would be looking at thousands of Yildirim fans. I didn't think he was going to get crowd support. Right? Since I thought Yildirim had more stamina, I thought if the fight went the distance, I was expecting Yildirim to win the fight. Right? I thought Eubank's only chance of winning the fight was by KO. I was wrong. Right? There's not only a foot speed gap here, folks, there's a skill gap. Understand, at the championship levels, you cannot show up and just expect to walk guys down. You have to have a back foot game. That's not a luxury. That's a necessity. Now, let's talk about round one. Yildirim doesn't have a back foot game. Just food for thought. Yildirim runs across the ring. He's ready. By the way, the crowd is a Yildirim crowd. Right? This is fight day. So, the bell rings. Yildirim runs across the ring. Looks like he's going to try to make short work of Eubank. Now, Eubank, the guy I thought was more slugger than boxer, gets up on his toes. Eubank has a back foot game. You see it in the first round. You see it out the gate. Eubank starts throwing a jab, backing up. Right? Eubank's the one who wants to box. Let's just say you could have knocked me over with a feather here. Right? You know, this is almost like watching Big George Foreman suddenly up on his toes, shooting a jab, moving backwards. I wasn't expecting it. I guess I didn't think enough of Chris Eubank, who really impressed me this fight. So let me just say this. Yildirim. To the Yildirim crowd, I want you to leave your comments in the comment section here. What is Yildirim doing? Allowing that jab to land. Somebody explain it to me. Eubank's trying to back up. He's sticking a jab. Now, let me just say this. Yildirim, to me, at this point, has three choices. Right? The first is he can just stand back and knock down the jab. Right? Look at the film of Sultan Ibragimov against Vladimir Klitschko, how Klitschko's just knocking down the jab. Right? To do that, you're obviously not going to stand there and let the jab touch your face. You're not going to let the jab touch you. Your point is to show the judges and show the other guy, look, I get this trick. I'm knocking down your jab. If Yildirim really believes he's the man, and if he wants to take on Eubank when Eubank's 100%, if he wants to force the issue out the gate, in other words, throw the gauntlet down in the first round even though you have 12 rounds. Yildirim could have tried to get inside by getting past the jab. Now that required him to either time the jab and jump in during gaps between the jab, or it required him to get creative in going inside, right? Bend at the waist. Try to slip inside. Think Dwight Cowie. Think Joe Frazier. Think Mike Tyson. Think Jack Dempsey. Right? In other words, this is championship level. I can't stand upright and think I'm just going to be able to walk in. I have to get some bob and weaving going, right? I have to knock down a jab, jump inside. I have to wait for an opening, jump inside. Or Yildirim could have simply stood outside. Now, I know this is not popular. This is the Jimmy Young side of the sport that I actually like. But Yildirim could have backed up himself. You know, said to, basically, let Eubank know, okay, I see you can throw a jab on your back foot. Are you the kind of guy who can throw your jab on your front foot? Are you going to come find me in the ring with this jab? Or are you expecting me to be foolish and to run into it? Well, let me just say, Yildirim really is foolish, because he stands pretty much upright. There's not enough bobbing and weaving with the guy. In other words, the movement is missing from his game. This jab bothered him far more than it should have. You know, you wanted to say to him, hey, guess what? You know, Chris Eubank's not Larry Holmes. Chris Eubank's not Sonny Liston. This jab shouldn't be bothering you that much. Well, you know the rest. Yildirim standing too upright. He's too rigid. His center of gravity not flexible enough. So he's coming forward and he's getting hit with Eubank's jab, right? Then Eubank, who's clever. In other words, Eubank's not a guy who's going to run all night like Canelo did from round 4 until about round 9 of that Golovkin fight. Right? Eubank's not going to be on his back foot the whole night. The back foot is just one stage of his game. Eubank starts pivoting. Right? Why? Well, he knows where Yildirim's going to be. Yildirim's walking forward upright, getting hit with jabs. Yildirim's about jab level. Right? So then Eubank starts transitioning to his front foot. So Yildirim has a high guard. It's an earmuff defense. That's what Teddy Atlas would call it, right? He has his hands up here. This is against an uppercut artist, right? No armbar. So you know what happens. Eubank pivots, comes in with an uppercut. You know where it lands. Right on Yildirim's chin. Well, let's just say Yildirim goes down in the first round. I know this is a macho sport. I know guys hit the canvas, they get up, they try to convince themselves, they try to convince the crowd that it's a flash knockdown and stuff like that. No, that's not a flash knockdown. That's by design. Eubank didn't luck into that punch, right? Eubank is controlling distance. Now, by that I mean he has the jab working, so the guy is outside. He's on his back foot. Then he's pivoting, where he's on his front foot. And he's coming in with punches that he has planned to throw. I have no doubt in my mind, looking at Eubank, that he studied films of his opponent and he had these routines worked out in practice. There's not a lot of wasted motion with Eubank. Let me also point out that he knew he didn't have an opponent who was going to turn sideways and bend and move away and remove the angles. Right? Yildirim keeps all the angles lined up for Eubank. So let me say this too. Eubank, again, this is big time stuff from a veteran fighter. At times in the first round, Eubank channels Floyd Mayweather, right? I'm just mentioning fighters. I'm not saying Mayweather's the only one to do this. Certainly this is part of the boxing game. I'm just mentioning guys who have these moves as big parts of their repertoire, right? With Floyd, there are times where a guy is trying to rough him up. A guy is trying to get him to move backwards, and Floyd refuses. Right? Floyd's not going to be Canelo, going from rope to rope. No, Floyd draws a line in the sand. has the guy who's coming forward end up running into his shoulder. Eubank at times stops moving. In other words, Yildirim doesn't know if he's back foot or front foot or in the middle. Right? Eubank stops moving. Yildirim literally walks into his shoulder. This is even though Eubank has the faster feet. This is even though it's early in the fight and Eubank still has close to 100% stamina. Right? That's when you realize that it's not Yildirim smothering Eubank. It's Eubank smothering Yildirim. Right? And Yildirim, sadly, is too robotic. He's not experienced enough to move laterally. In other words, Eubank's moving behind a jab. Then Eubank's leaping in with uppercuts. Then Eubank stops moving altogether. Right? Now, I know it's a fight. I know there's testosterone involved. There are times where an opponent should just walk away. I'm serious about this. You don't even have to look cute. Just have your defense in place so the guy can't hit you as you're backing away and back away. Yildirim has to realize that he doesn't want to be where Eubank wants him to be. If a fighter stops moving backwards and just draws a line in the sand and is just looking for an opening so he could drop a shoulder and hit you with an uppercut, what are you doing staying in the pocket? If you aren't coming back with your best offensive game. Well, you know the rest. Yildirim is so confused that when Eubank stops and Yildirim's on his shoulder, Yildirim stays there. Right? Eubank never has to guess where Yildirim is going to be. Right? My point to young fighters is you don't have to always be on your back foot against some bullish guy who's trying to walk you down. Right? If you know the guy is just one gear where he's trying to walk you down, you can do what Eubank does. Be on your back foot, read the tempo, then come in. Drop your feet and come in with power shots. If the guy keeps walking straight and you know that the guy's right hand is really his Sunday punch, you can just have him walk into a shoulder. Well, Eubank is even more advanced than that. Right? In the second round, you notice that Eubank, and to me, this is real advanced stuff. Right? This brother, much better than I realized. Eubank doesn't have to look at the punch to move his head out of the way. In other words, there are moments there in the second round where Eubank's like this. He has a shoulder, right up front. Yildirim's right here on the shoulder. By the way, exactly where Eubank wants him to be. Right? It's as if Eubank said, hey, here are instructions I want you to follow. Right? Eubank is the director here. And Yildirim's the hired talent. So to make a long story short, Yildirim then starts throwing right hands from this side of Eubank. And Eubank, knowing he's throwing right hands, looks this way and knows that if he rolls his head down, and to the right, those right hands can't land. In other words, all he has to do is sense movement from Yildirim. He doesn't have to look at the punch. He's saving time. All he has to do is sense movement from Yildirim, and he knows, if I think he's throwing a right hand, let me just roll this way. Several right hands that Yildirim throws, right from up here down, miss Eubank's head. It also shows you how limited Yildirim was. If Eubank has you on the shoulder, why try to hit his head? Doesn't he have a body right here that's closer to you? Don't you want him to pay with kidney shots? You know, not only that, if you're throwing punches and the guy has it timed where he's rolling away from the punches, isn't that the time to feint a punch? Feint the punch, have Eubank roll away. Then when Eubank comes back, isn't that when you'd hit him with the shot? Well, let's just say Yildirim over his head. I'll even go further. You know, fighting before your fans sometimes is a bad idea. You have high-level fighters, some Hall of Famers, Azuma Nelson, who actually had the philosophy of wanting to fight guys who were fighting in front of their home crowd. The idea was that the opponent would be so caught up in the moment. So, after having dealt with the local press and family members wanting tickets and friends wanting tickets, in the fight, the hometown fighter would be so caught up in trying to prove to the fans that he's macho, that he's the man, that emotion would get the best of him, and common sense plays like working the body, backing away from the pocket when Eubank wants you in the pocket, and Eubank's an uppercut artist, right? Common sense gives way to trying to impress fans, trying to make a statement. So here it was amazing. I thought the fact that it was likely to be a Yildirim crowd would actually help Yildirim. Instead, it helped Eubank, because Yildirim in the moment seemed too caught up to bob and weave his way in, to throw body shots, to back away when Eubank had him on a shoulder and had him deep in the pocket. So let me just say this. Eubank realizes by round 3 that he can land a left hook up top, right? It's not an uppercut that ends the fight. It's a left hook up top. Let me also say, too, at a certain point, it doesn't matter how tough your opponent looks, right? Yildirim looks confident and all this other stuff. I believe Yildirim's very mentally tough, right? But the bottom line is Eubank knocks him down in the first round. By the third round, Eubank already knows that Yildirim can't take his power and that Yildirim isn't unbeatable, even though it's Yildirim who enters the fight as the unbeaten fighter. So Eubank figures out that he could land that left hook up top to the side of Yildirim's head. Right? I want you to look at the last exchange between the fighters. I know it looks like a shootout. It's not a shootout, because Eubank is throwing punches he knows are going to land. Right? The referee, after he knocks down Yildirim on a beautiful left hook up top, and keep in mind, Eubank has been landing right uppercuts, right? Eubank's been landing right uppercuts. Yildirim doesn't know what's coming. As they start to throw, Eubank knows, because he's just landed a hard left up top moments before. Eubank knows the left hand's there. When Eubank hits Yildirim with that left hand flush, and Yildirim hits the canvas, it's so clean. The ref immediately stops the fight. I'm talking about immediately. Let me point out, too, that ref did a great thing, because he saved Yildirim, right? Certainly, he saved several years of Yildirim's boxing career. He goes down hard. He's completely outclassed. Had he continued fighting, he could have been badly hurt. So let me say this. While I'm still taking Jürgen Brähmer to win the tournament at 168 pounds, I'll concede that Chris Eubank is much better than I thought. Right? Let me just say, I hope something happens where Golovkin decides he's going to challenge Eubank for his belt at 168 pounds. I don't want to catch weight. I don't want, and I don't want anyone to expect Eubank to drain himself to go down to 160 to fight Golovkin. But I would like to see Golovkin against Eubank, because I think that'd be an excellent fight. Let me say this too. I'm impressed with Eubank, but he was not fighting James DeGale here. Right? I would still take James DeGale, who I consider to be the best at 168 pounds, over Chris Eubank. I'll also say too that as impressed as I am with Gilberto Ramirez, a fighter you need to know, a fighter who's unbeaten, a fighter who has a share of the title at 168 pounds, right? I will say that I do think that Eubank has much more in his toolkit, right? Eubank can bend at the waist. Eubank can move. Eubank understands spacing. Eubank plays with spacing. He's outside behind a jab. Suddenly he stops moving and he's lunging in with uppercuts, right? He can get low. Before this fight, I thought Ramirez would beat Eubank. Now, I'm not so sure, right? So Eubank has me fascinated. I know the press is talking about George Groves against Eubank and stuff like that. I'm curious to see him against Southpaw Bramer, because I think Bramer will know how to deal. Bramer will be playing many of the same games that Eubank plays in the ring, fooling around with distance and angles and stuff like that, right? Let's just say that fight is going to be big. Of course, I do expect Bramer to beat Rob Brandt. We'll see if that comes true. Anyway, that's how I see it. Let me hear from you. Eubank, much better than I thought. I look forward to reading your comments. Thanks for stopping by.